Hi, I'm Tim, welcome to our channel, and thank you for logging on. If you enjoy these videos, do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel right here at Watchbox Reviews. I would really appreciate it, and I promise to update daily. If you love this watch, you could see it and you could purchase it on our website, thewatchbox.com. And today we are discussing a vintage circa 1978 Rolex Oyster Perpetual Submariner 1680. You can see this timepiece, which is roughly a 5.6 million serial number, is handsome and intact, with all of its original metal case lines, even its original tritium dial hands and lug bevels. We'll talk about that in a moment. Older subs from the 1680 generation, which ran from the mid-60s through early 80s, well, they're a little bit smaller than modern 40mm subs. So while the watch measures about 39.5mm at the edge of its bezel, you can see the bezel overlaps a little bit, so the true size of the watch is probably about 38.5mm. It is thicker than a modern sub though, and that because of the immense box section plexiglass that's necessary to achieve 200-meter water resistance, or was back in the day. I don't recommend diving with any vintage watches, but the time is 13.9mm thick, so 13.9mm by 47.5, that is the distance lug-to-lug across the wrist. So this watch does wear considerably more compact than a modern-day Submariner in a super case. I can recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference. But as with a modern Rolex sub, you get a 20mm spacing between the lugs, and back then you had the strap tool apertures in the lugs, and the idea was that you would swap out for a strap from time to time. I should also mention that while this watch is wonderfully intact, and we'll take a look at the case and the dial in a moment, this is a later bracelet, as its clasp serial code is roughly 1996, and it is a later production reference 93150 with 580 end links, so you know exactly what you're getting, and you can see that underneath. It is a very solid later edition that was likely added in order to bring the watch up to spec during the 1990s. As there's very little play on either side of this bracelet, it retains all of the integrity with which it left Geneva in 96. And you can see, as with the case itself, we have not polished this bracelet. Removable links of this Oyster are fixed by screws, and you have what was then the thing for Rolex, a stamped clasp, and you can see, again, unpolished, the definition of the link embossed pattern on the outside, as well as the raised Rolex crown, absolutely crisp. There are a few incremental adjustment notches inside of the clasp so you can size without removing or adding links, and then there is a Rolex flip lock dive extension that you can extend over a wetsuit or a dry suit, but since again you're not going to dive with this vintage watch, you're going to use it over a thick winter sweater or coat. The watch is wonderfully intact, and this is a real highlight of the piece. No two vintage watches are exactly alike, so I like to showcase the highlights or the lowlights just to be completely transparent. We sell pre-owned and vintage watches after all. Here you can see not only are the lugs nicely defined, full, even side to side, but they even at all four corners feature the original factory beveling. That's how original this watch is. You could see the original bevels, and not faintly. They are pronounced. There's absolutely no protrusion of spring bar from any of the four holes. And you can see that there are marks on the case, but they're honest marks, a sign of a watch that has lived a good life in careful hands and rarely, if ever, been polished. Now, the triplock crown is framed by a pair of crown guards that, as you can see, are full and shapely with no dents. The bezel is a bi-directional rotating unit, and as you can see, the dial is remarkably original. Let's see if we can give ourselves a bit more light here. It's a matte feet-first dial that is period correct, and you'll note, exceptionally, the original hands have been retained. Usually those have been replaced by service over time, but the dial is a handsome tritium fade, period correct, all intact, no loose material, no crumbling, no oxidation, no marks from incompetent watchmaking. Basically, in summary, it's exactly what you would want. It doesn't look too perfect, and it's certainly not a time capsule, but it's an outstanding survivor that's factory inside and out. Underneath the case back, Rolex manufacture caliber 1575. You could see, truly untouched. This watch includes the original rather shallow back engraving and dedication, and this would have been the first thing to go if the watch had been refinished. So Stewart Equipment Co., you do right by your folks. I hope you're still around and still doing this. But for everyone else, you got to buy the watch. Never mind 30 years. 30 hours and we can have this to your house by airmail. Now the timepiece has that 1575 movement inside, 26 joules, automatic winding, 45 to 48 hour power reserve. It beats away to quirky vintage 19,800 vibrations per hour. It features stop seconds but not a quick set date, and the movement features 5-position adjustment and COSC chronometer certification. It also features Rolex's characteristic handmade Breguet overcoil to help it keep excellent time in any orientation with respect to gravity. And while I never recommend you dive with a vintage watch. That's one particular feature and facet of a watch that ebbs with time. The watch can still be made, even after decades, to run COSC chronometer spec time. So in that respect, it remains a precision instrument as good as when it left Geneva in 1978. You can see this 78 big sideburn, panel van, earth tones era Rolex Submariner 1680, and make it yours on the watch box.